Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 44. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us on this Monday show, getting ready for kickoff tonight in this Week 8 primetime matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers, sitting at 5-2, and the 2-5 New York Giants at Acrisure Stadium. Dave, obviously different show for this Monday, given the game has not kicked off yet, but still same format. Got a great guest on later today. We'll preview this game ourselves, and what a great weekend of games there were to begin with. And hopefully this Giants and Steelers games can end things on a high note as well.
Yeah, sort of an interesting week for us. Not often we have the Monday night games that we have to cover, which leaves open for us to watch a lot of football on Sunday, and that was extremely enjoyable, especially that early slate of games, and then to end it all with the Commanders and the Hail Mary beating the Bears there. So really enjoyable Sunday overall. And now, as you stated, we get ready for the Monday night game at Acrisure. Gonna be a lot of buzz in the air, obviously. The color rush uniforms tonight, and the Steelers sitting in prime position with everything that happened in the AFC North, and really the AFC in general overall puts the Steelers in prime position that if they get this win tonight, obviously move to 6-2, they'll be in sole possession of first place of the AFC North, and hopefully stay healthy through this game Monday night and go into their bye week and then start getting ready for the second half of the season. And one of the things we said is, look, this team's got to take care of business in the first half of the schedule before the bye, and at 5-2, I feel they've done that to this point. And to finish that off, they need to beat the Giants in a game that's very winnable at home.
Yeah, to go 6-2 into the bye would be an ideal place to be. And the division broke in Pittsburgh's favor yesterday, with the Browns upsetting the Ravens and the Eagles blowing out the Bengals in the second half. So Baltimore at 5-3, Pittsburgh can go to 6-2 against the Giants, and in a good position to do so. Got a great guest later on to talk Giants. That's Dan Dugan, who covers the team for The Athletic. We'll talk to him, get his perspective on all things New York in just a bit. But for the here and now, Dave, injury standpoint, it's not often we get to talk about the final injury report for the Sunday typical game. Usually the Friday report comes out after we record Friday morning. So a report came out on Saturday, although it had an update on Sunday. So let's talk about the players that have been officially ruled out from that Friday report. That's Roman Wilson, Tyler Matakevich, Nick Herbig, Zach Frazier, Dylan Cook. Matakevich and Cook will remain on IR. Cordero Patterson initially listed as doubtful. He's now officially out for this game. And really the big kind of headline news from the injury standpoint is what happened on Sunday morning, just out of the blue. Justin Fields listed as questionable with a hamstring injury. Jay Glazer would later talk to Mike Tomlin and say that Fields probably not going to go in this one, likely gets an MRI after this game. Don't know if there are major alarm bells going off about the injury, but obviously it's a surprise, and hamstring injuries can be tricky. So Pittsburgh, it seemed like, had a plan to go with a 2-quarterback approach tonight, use Fields in some sort of sub packages. That seems very, very doubtful to happen. And you just hope this does not become a long-term issue for Justin Fields.
Yeah, Jay Glazer said specifically doesn't think he's going to be able to go tomorrow night. This, obviously said this Sunday, talking about Monday night. He's not sure yet, though, in talking to Tomlin. Probably going to have to get an MRI after the game. So it's going to be all Russell Wilson. This was a game that they're kind of were hoping to use that two-headed quarterback duo out there, but not really going to be able to do that now because of the hamstring. So I guess the biggest question is will Justin Fields be the number 3, be the emergency? You would think, either he's healthy enough to be the number 2. Doesn't sound like that's the case, though, does it? But Mike Tomlin did say he's not sure yet if he's able to go. I think that's the biggest question I have overall, especially when it comes to predicting these pregame inactives is, will Justin Fields be healthy enough to be the number 2, or will he just dress as the emergency number 3?
Or dress at all and not even be considered and declared the emergency third quarterback. I'm pretty confident based on the language and the way this thing seems to be trending that Kyle Allen will be the number 2 tonight. The question would be, can Fields, dress the way that Russell Wilson dressed his first couple weeks as that emergency third, or will he just be a straight inactive in street clothes? You're getting an MRI after. I don't know if you're going to be dressed to play in that just in case situation. So we'll see. Again, I'm betting the team is being cautious overall, but hamstring injuries, as was the case with Russ's calf injury, they can be tricky. They can linger, especially for a more mobile quarterback like Fields. You got the bye week coming up, which will be great for him. Hopefully he could come back for week 10 if he does not, he's not active, he's not dressing for tonight's game, but we'll just have to wait and see.
I'm going to guess that he dresses as the emergency number 3, that he can at least hand the football off and do some minimal passing or something along those lines, but definitely something to watch here. We'll see if the injury report gets adjusted here when they we'll have to also see if they got any late elevations or whatnot on top of it. Obviously not having Cordell Patterson back this week and not having Roman Wilson makes you kind of wonder if we might see a wide receiver elevated here. And, other than that, I think the inactive list is going to be pretty easy to figure out because you got a handful of guys in Frazier and Herbig and Patterson all ruled out. And you're going to have one of those spots go to the potentially be a quarterback, whoever that is, and then kind of go from there. So a little bit of intrigue. I would imagine we'll have at least one elevation to report later on in the afternoon.
Yeah, I would expect Brandon Johnson, who's one elevation left available to him and to the team, would get the call up for this one with no Roman Wilson, that hamstring injury. Will this guy see the field again this year? I mean, that's harder to predict. Hopefully he'll dress again. Not saying the hamstring injury will take him out for the season, but just all the time missed and the recurring injuries. Unfortunate there. The Patterson being down, they're going to want an extra backup receiver just in case. So I would assume Johnson. Will something happen with Jonathan Ward? He's had elevations. Would they sign him to the 53 with Patterson being down? Release Aaron Shamplin. I seem to have a preference for Ward over Shamplin for special teams value, kick return, right wing on punts, that kind of stuff. We'll see, but nothing that'll be groundbreaking in terms of pregame roster moves.
Yeah, we'll have to wait, obviously, on Dylan Cook and Tyler Matakevich. They're not going to be activated off IR this week with their 21-day windows still open. And then, obviously, after the bye, hopefully this team will be able to open the 21-day window on a couple other guys.
I thought Matakevich was going to go this week. The way that Tomlin talked about it on Tuesday, Matakevich had an interview and seemed pretty excited to go in this one. Maybe that hamstring just didn't respond the way the team had hoped. He was limited in practice all week, as was Cordero Patterson. But probably, like you said, exercising some caution with him and guys like Frazier to sit out this game, hopefully beat the Giants, have the bye, come back for week 10, and what's become a much tougher than expected game against Washington.
Right, exactly.
From the Giants' standpoint, it's similar to the Jets, where they got some DB issues and a couple of corners. Cordell Flott is doubtful in this one. Adoree Jackson, who's not played a ton for them this year, but still some good depth and versatility. He's not going to play in this one. Got another guy in Trey Hawkins who's questionable. Really want to see what's going to happen at right tackle, too, with the starting right tackle, Jermaine Illuminor. He's got a hip groin injury, questionable. He says he's going to play. Is he telling the truth? Is he being optimistic? We're not quite sure. That Giants O-line already missing the starting left tackle and Andrew Thomas out for the year with a foot injury. So really want to see the status of Illuminor tonight.
Yeah, and then who does end up starting at left tackle? That's another question that we threw out to our guest, Dan Dugan, during our interview. So we'll kind of save his response for later in the show there. But definitely not an ideal situation when it comes to the Giants, when it comes to their two tackles overall. And you got Alex Heisman coming off of his first game back. Was a solid performance against the Jets as he returned from that groin injury. They got some other guy on that other side named TJ Watt. He's pretty good. I think they should keep TJ Watt. But I'm obviously being funny there. But this could be a big game for the edge guys overall for the Steelers in this one.
Yeah, you like the matchups on paper for sure. And TJ Watt, no sacks in his last 2 games, all the attention he's gotten. So I bet you he's itching to get number 102 and get that march towards Bruce Smith's all-time record of 200. Any other pregame things to talk about? Report coming out, and Dan talks about this too, that Daniel Jones will not have a short leash. This comes from ESPN. We'll talk about the Giants more here in a second, but just want to get that note out of the way. Any other pregame weekend stuff that I might have missed, Dave?
No, I think we got most of it. Just going to be watching those transactions that happen later on today.
All right, well, let's just get to our interview then, and we'll come back and preview the Giants game ourselves after we talk to Dan Dugan, who covers the Giants. He's the beat writer for The Athletic. You can follow him on Twitter at DDuggan21. That's DDUGGAN21. We'll take a pause and come back with Dan.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. It is Monday morning, and that means we are recording this ahead of the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the New York Football Giants on Monday Night Football. And as we do ahead of every Steelers game, we have a beat writer on who covers the opposing team. And with it being the Giants this week, we have a first-timer with us, Dan Dugan, veteran beat writer for The Athletic, and he has covered the Giants for quite a while. Senior writer, actually, over at The Athletic. You can follow Dan on Twitter /X at DDuggan, DUGGAN 21. We'll make sure to put that handle on our Twitter accounts and in the post so you can make sure you can find him easily. And also, please make sure to get over to The Athletic today and read some of the great fine work he has over there. Dan, welcome to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex. Happy Monday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. That was quite the intro. I kind of felt old though through a lot of that stuff. Senior writer, been doing this for a long time. But yeah, no, my first year on the beat actually was 2016. That's the last time the Giants played in Pittsburgh. So I'm looking forward to checking out this atmosphere, particularly in a primetime game. I've heard a lot about it, and so it should be interesting to take it in.
Yeah, obviously going to happen at Acrisure. The Steelers wearing the color rush uniform. Should be exciting atmosphere. Even a Manning cast going on tonight as well. Dan, let's start first with something that was pointed out in our pregame scouting reports here. And the fact that the Giants are one of these few teams in the NFL on offense that likes to throw the ball more than they like to run the ball on early downs, and especially early in games and through the first 3 quarters of the game. Why do you suppose that is? Is that something that has been talked about with Daboll and company there? Just what is the kind of the theory and schematics and need to throw so early on early downs for this offense?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of in Daboll's DNA. You remember when he was in Buffalo with, top offenses, that was still the knock on him at times. Kind of got under Sean McDermott's skin. I think he had a game his last year in Buffalo where they opened it with like 21 straight passes or something insane like that. We haven't quite seen that rate, but it was pretty close last week against Philly. They only called 3 handoffs to running backs in the first half, and it wasn't as if the game was out of hand or anything. It's just that's how he likes to play. I think, this running game hasn't been super effective. So I think he looks at it like, hell, if I'm going to be facing 2nd and 9 and 2nd and 8 all day, let me at least try and, get a 5-yard pass and use that as kind of in place of the run game. But I do think it's something they need to get back to some level of running the ball. Because again, 3 handoffs to a running backs in the first half of a close game is kind of ridiculous. Of course, this probably isn't the matchup to try to establish the run, because obviously Steelers have a great run defense. Not sure they're going to have a lot of success passing either, but I think at least maybe their best chance is to try to get something going on the ground, because I think they want to play this game tonight like a 4 corners basketball type thing where you just want to limit the chances of disaster, take the air out of the ball, and obviously the best way to do that is to run it, but again, they haven't been very good at it, so it's kind of a catch-22 they're facing there.
I know there was a lot of talk. You roll back to Hard Knocks this offseason and got to see kind of the process they went through in deciding to let Saquon Barkley go. They do have a couple of talented running backs overall, at least in what I consider a fungible position in the NFL. In Tracy and the other kid back there, but Singleton is it Singletary?
Yeah, Devin Singletary. Yep.
Yeah, Singletary there. And I know Singletary's been banged up a little bit there overall. But when you look at this offensive line, I think that's kind of the biggest question going into this tackle position. Specifically, I know Jermaine Illuminor has come out and said he's going to play at right tackle there. I know there's been some talk about who's going to start at left tackle between Ezadu and potentially even former Steeler Chris Hubbard. I think you reported that they splitted reps this past week in practice. Do you have a good idea of which way they're going to go there at left tackle?
I mean, honestly, as we sit here tonight, right now, I don't. I think those guys, like I said, they did split reps. My sense is to go with Ezeudu because I mean, he was a third-round pick here in 2022. Really, people viewed him as a guard. For whatever reason, they've decided tackle is his home, and they put him in last year when Andrew Thomas got hurt, and it was a disaster. So they came back this offseason. And somehow that was the backup plan again. Now, the difference was last year, they had tried to make him a starting guard. He was in like a training camp competition all summer, then didn't win the guard job. So then somehow he became the swing tackle. This year, at least, they gave him all spring, all summer as the swing tackle. So when Thomas goes down, I mean, I can't overstate how much of a crushing blow that is to this offense. I mean, he is they're the most indispensable player. Like Dexter Lawrence is their best player. But, a franchise left tackle on a line that really isn't that good otherwise, it's almost insurmountable. And again, they don't have a good swing tackle. So, but my initial point was the plan all along was Ezeudu's the swing tackle. Now, Thomas goes down. They went and got Hubbard off the 49ers practice squad. I mean, you would know probably better than me. I know he hasn't played a lot of left tackle in his career, more right tackle and some guard. So if you're going to break glass already after one shaky performance from Ezeudu, what does that say about your offseason planning? So I would think. And it didn't go well. Listen, Ezeudu didn't look better last week against Philly. He gave up 2 third-down sacks in the first quarter. Kind of felt like, oh, here we go again. And I'm sure that's the feeling they had. That's why they're at least entertaining the idea of putting Hubbard there. My guess is they'll start Ezeudu, and it's just going to be a short leash. If he gives up 2 sacks in the first quarter, then you make the change. I would be surprised, again, if they bring in a guy with another team's practice squad and after a handful of practices, they decide he's the better option. But I definitely think they understand that this Ezeudu experiment just might not be working. So you at least have to have a better insurance policy than they have had in the past.
When you look at the skill positions overall, obviously drafted Malik Neighbors, a fine talent. Darius Slayton's established in the league. We know a lot from scouting Wendell Robinson when he came out. I mean, they have some talent over there. Obviously, the running backs, not what Saquon Barkley is. Is this a does this just boil down to a quarterback situation here with the Giants with Daniel Jones? And I noticed you put up there conveniently yesterday after that game that clip of rolling back to them talking about Jaden Daniels and thinking that he was worthy of trading up. Hindsight obviously is 2020, and you just can't push the Madden button to make a trade happen. But is the quarterback position the biggest thing that's holding this offense back at this point?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, I think you could probably say that about any team. If you injected a CJ Stroud or a Jaden Daniels or one of these guys, you could really change the entire complexion of a franchise. Because again, we're seeing it in Washington. Washington was a terrible team last year, and all of a sudden they put him in there. What are they, 6-2 right now? And obviously, he's got some magic to him with the Hail Mary yesterday. But yeah, that Hard Knocks clip. Yeah, it wasn't even saying like they should have traded up for him because Washington wasn't going to trade with them. It's more just a matter of like they knew, like they were in that room and Dable was like, yeah, I'll trade up for him. Like they knew that this guy had the goods. So just unfortunate for them that they couldn't get up there to get him. I mean, they tried. They wanted to go to number 3 with New England. They would have been very happy with Drake May. Couldn't get that done either. So yeah, now they left to run it back with Daniel Jones this year. It kind of has felt like this was his last stand. It has not gone well. He had a few pretty good games, early in the season, like had a good game when they went out and beat Seattle, which was a very unexpected win. But since then, they scored 7 points in a home loss to Cincy, 3 points in a home loss to Philly. Now, he's not the only problem, but of course, kind of everything starts there. And again, with Andrew Thomas out, I think it'd be very tough for this offense to really establish any type of consistency. You mentioned Neighbors, like that's the star power type guy that, yeah, if you can get an elite quarterback, you'll really have something there. You'd hope like a Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase type of dynamic there if they get that guy in here. But certainly that's what they're going to be on the market for again this offseason. They couldn't get the bat off their shoulder this year, picking sixth. I think next year it's going to be at all costs. If they're not picking high enough to get one, they're going to have to trade the farm because you just can't keep kind of spinning your wheels here. I think it's time for them to really make a move and try to get their version of Jaden Daniels if there is one of those guys in this class, which may not be the case, which is a tough spot they're in.
Dan, to stick with quarterback, Daniel Jones was pulled for Drew Lock to finish out that blowout loss to the Eagles. But then right after the game and the following day, Brian Daboll was committed to Daniel Jones all the way. Why was he so quick to name Jones a starter? And do you think he could have a short leash if he struggles again tonight against Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one I'm probably about to fire up a tweet about because I've been thinking about it. I think he got pulled because it was an emotional decision in the heat of the moment by Daboll. Just frustrated the offense couldn't do anything last week. These coaches and GMs, they sit down on Friday and they map out all the roster configurations. I doubt in that meeting that Daboll and GM Joe Shane said, "Listen, if we're down 28-3 at the start of the fourth quarter, I'm going to pull Jones." I don't think that's how that went. I really think it was in the heat of the moment. So then I think he realized, okay, that's a big move. If you pull him with 3 minutes to go, nobody bats an eye. But the start of the fourth quarter, that's kind of saying something. And Drew Lock went in and was terrible. So if Drew Lock had gone in there and marched him up and down the field, even if it's garbage time and scored a touchdown or two, then you might have a decision to make. But I think after he saw Drew Lock go out there, I think he was 3 for 8 for 6 yards with 2 fumbles. It was bad. So I think he looks at that and says, all right, we don't have a quarterback concentrated on our hands here, so I'm going to nip this in the bud immediately because he knows how the media, particularly in New York, could be. So I think him to get ahead of it and then not back down. From what I've heard, Jones took all the first team reps in practice. But to the other part of your question, what happens tonight if it's 21-3 after 3 quarters? I think that's very much on the table. I think he's going to err on the side of not pulling him because, again, I think that was a rash decision in the moment. He's just very frustrated. I think he's cognizant of not creating, a bigger controversy. So, I think at some point down the line here, we could see a quarterback change, but I think another in-game benching would surprise me. I think it'd be a type of decision where you step back, talk about it on Monday, and then on Tuesday, come in, all right, we're going to go with Drew this week, or even Tommy DeVito if it gets to that point. I don't think there will be a short leash. But I think it'll be hard to fight that temptation because, again, this very easily could be a game where they're struggling to score and are getting blown out. But I just think to avoid the controversy and the fallout that would come with it, I think he'll kind of sit tight and just ride it out with Jones tonight.
Yeah, it's hard to live that life consistently in game. This is a question that's driving me crazy, and you guys are probably familiar with it. But the more I dug into it, the more I was like, this is insane. Why is Daniel Jones so much better on the road than he is at home? All 6 of his touchdowns this year have come on the road. All 4 of his picks this year have come at home, and that's consistent throughout his entire career. Is there any rationale for why? It's like baseball player type stuff, of why he's so much better on the road than he is at home.
No, and it's crazy. Like it really isn't a great answer, but it's funny because if you look at his splits, he's started 34 games at home, 33 on the road, and he's 12-21-1 at home and 12-21 on the road. So it's not as if he's played so much better that the team has won more on the road. They've basically kind of been a bad team throughout his entire tenure outside of 2022. And some of his other stats like completion percentage and yardage are similar. But then you go to touchdowns, interception. It's insane. I'm looking at it right now. He's got 27 touchdowns and 30 picks in his career at home. 41 touchdowns and 14 picks on the road. Like that is mind-blowing contrast there. Yeah, and obviously we've been asking about it. And listen, I don't think these guys would know the answer to that. I'm sitting, I can't even formulate it. It doesn't make any sense. Because again, it's not as if he's played significantly better in terms of the teams plays better on the road. Like again, the record's the same. It just feels kind of like a weird fluke. But it's 6 years worth of evidence, so it's obviously probably more than that. I don't know if it's maybe at home he's more tense, he's uptight. Listen, he throws one bad pass at home these days and the boos come out. And guys will say on the road, you kind of have that us against them mentality. But yeah, I don't know. It's amazing. You look at those touchdown interception ratios. It's hard to wrap your head around how it could be so drastically different.
Flipping over to the other side of the football, obviously Dexter Lawrence is having a great season, 9 sacks so far. Brian Burns, obviously a big acquisition, holding up his part over there. They're getting sacks on the quarterback, probably not the rate of pressure overall like that you'd like to see overall there, but it goes without saying that when Mike Tomlin held his press conference earlier in the week, he definitely noted that Dexter Lawrence is a guy that's got to be handled. The Steelers will have Ryan McCollum making a second start there at center. Other than using lead pipes and tire chains, what's the best way to try to control Dexter Lawrence, and where have teams, not that they've had a lot of success overall, because the guy's just got raw power overall. And even if you look at his sack reel up until right now, even when 2 guys on him, he's been able to fight through that. So what's the best way to limit him?
Yeah, you might want to try for the lead pipes, because nothing's worked. I mean, like, he is not only does he lead the league in sacks as a nose tackle, which is unheard of. He's got 9 of them through 7 games. He also gets doubled at the highest rate, I think, by far in the league. I mean, every play, you can never leave him one-on-one. You leave him one-on-one, you're putting your quarterback's life in danger, because he wins so fast. It's so unusual. Like, we've seen guys even on the interior, like an Aaron Donald, and they're explosive, twitchy athletes. Dexter Lawrence will just like take another grown man and just drive him back into the quarterback's lap. I've never seen anything like it. So obviously you're going to double him, 75% of the snaps, and the other 25, you better be getting that ball out fast. Because I think that's probably the counter, is to get the ball out quick. That's what teams have done against them when they've had success. And the other thing is run the ball. He's a good run defender for sure, but you can't wreck the game quite the same way as a run defender. And the rest of the run defense is really weak. And I know that's what Pittsburgh wants to do anyway. So I think that kind of plays into their favor. I mean, you just saw what Saquon did. Obviously, he had a little extra motivation last week, but it wasn't just him. Kenny Gainwell, Philly just ran all over them, and it's been puzzling. In some of the games where the Giants have fared well, you've had teams, we're talking about that Brian Dable aversion to run the ball. You've had teams have that kind of game plan, and it just makes me scratch my head. It's like, why are we leaning into the Giants' strength, which is their pass rush, and not just running it down their throats so they prove they can stop it? Because they really haven't. You go back to some of the losses, like Washington ran all over them, the Vikings ran all over them, Philly. So I would think if Pittsburgh comes out, commits to the run, which I don't think that'll be a problem for a Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith team, I don't think the Giants will be able to stop it consistently. And then again, that's the way you keep Dexter Lawrence from wrecking the game, because you're in 2nd and 4, or you're just marching down the field. But because if you're in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, it can be a long day, because he's outstanding. Burns has, he's been really good off the edge. Shane Bowen, the defensive coordinator, has done some good things to give quarterbacks some different looks. So that's their strength. If they're going to win this game, it's strictly going to be because the pass rush just dominates and forces turnovers, stuff like that. Because otherwise, they don't have the personnel to win this game.
This is a banged up Giants secondary coming into this game, sort of similar to the Jets last week, who the Steelers faced. Cordell Flott he's not going to play. I think Adoree Jackson's been ruled out in this. I think Trey Hawkins is banged up, kind of questionable. I would imagine you probably try to give it a go here. Deonte Banks going to play one corner position. Mike Tomlin talked up, I think, Drew Phillips during his press conference as the nickel there. What is this outside secondary in for? And looks like they play a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 1 overall, but with kind of a banged up secondary, I kind of wonder if we just might see just a lot of zone overall in this one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, like I said, they're very banged up there. I mean, Cordell Flott had been playing pretty well as a third-year guy. It seemed that he'd been bouncing between the nickel and outside, and it seemed like he found a home outside this year. It's been pretty solid. He's not going to play. He's doubtful. And then even Trey Hawkins, he's questionable. I've heard it's not looking good for him. So now you're basically 3 healthy corners going into this game of, Banks, Drew Phillips, who you mentioned, who he's been outstanding as a slot corner, like plays super physical, flies up and makes plays against the run, and which is really important in this defense because they play a lot of light boxes. So having a guy like that in that role is really essential, and he's been excellent in coverage, been quiet in a good way, like you haven't been seeing slot receivers having big games against the Giants. So that leaves that other cornerback spot. I think Nick McLeod is kind of the last man standing there. He's been a guy who's sort of been a utility man for them over the last couple of years. He can play nickel, he can play outside, he can play safety. He's a really good special teamer. Not a guy you necessarily want to play, 65 snaps on the outside, but they really don't have another choice. So what I think they will do is they'll put Banks on Pickens. He'll travel with him. Banks has done that all season, and that's obviously a daunting challenge when you're talking about going from 1 week it's DK Metcalf, the next week it's AJ Brown, the next week it's Justin Jefferson. I mean, he's had some big matchups, and he has not played super well. Which again, I mean, what corner could against that gauntlet he's faced? But he's definitely by far their best cover corner. The problem with him, he doesn't make plays on the ball, and obviously when you're talking about Pickens' strength is those contested catches. So I would not be surprised if we see a few plays today where Deonte Banks has great coverage and George Pickens still makes the catch because he just fails to make plays on the ball. So yeah, I think that they will go that route where he's going to travel. So yeah, like you said, they play a lot of cover 1, cover 3. I don't know that they will change that drastically, because the other thing, I mean, you look at Pittsburgh stats, I mean, no other receiver is really doing anything. Right. So I would think you can probably hope you can get away with a game with Nick McLeod on. I don't know who's the other outside receiver.
Van Jefferson, Calvin Austin.
I think you feel okay. I mean, again, Nick McLeod and Drew Phillips aren't like these proven guys, but that's not a mismatch like you're talking about Jamar Chase and T. Higgins the other week, or AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. So I would think that it'll be kind of all on Banks. That matchup with Pickens will be crucial. I'm sure they'll have safety help there, again, knowing how dangerous he is on those deep contested catches. But yeah, no, it's a banged up unit. It hasn't been exploited as much as I thought, just because the pass rush has been so good, but certainly it hasn't been lights out either.
Dan, you kind of touched on it, but just to wrap a bow on the point, Deonte Banks, Dave and I talked about him a ton in the 2023 draft. It was him, Joey Porter Jr., Pittsburgh ultimately drafted, Christian Gonzalez, Emmanuel Forbes, the top names. How has Banks been doing since the Giants made him their first round pick?
I mean, I would say his rookie year was fine. Like, it wasn't amazing, it wasn't bad. It was just, he was out there all the time, had some good games, had some tough games, but he was the cornerback 2, and they had Adoree Jackson as the cornerback 1, so he didn't really draw those tough matchups. And when he didn't fare very well. So coming back into this year, they anointed him as the cornerback 1. We're expecting a big leap. They actually brought Adoree back way at the end of camp just because the depth chart was looking pretty shaky, but he hasn't done anything. He's been kind of in and out of the lineup, so he hasn't been a factor. So again, it's been Banks has been the number 1 corner. Like I said, he's faced really good receivers, and even sometimes the final stat line hasn't been bad, where it's like, Justin Jefferson didn't go off, but when it's a gotta have it play, I think it was 3rd and goal, maybe 4th and goal actually, and Jefferson beats him on a quick slant for a touchdown. So he's had moments like that where it's like, hey, if you're going to be a true number 1, it's not easy, but those are the plays we need you to make, and he hasn't. And then the big thing with him is he had just a abysmal showing last week on a scramble by Jalen Hurts. It was a 3rd down. He got out of the pocket. Banks is running right at him, like parallel to the Hurts' trajectory, and for some reason just pulled up. And I mean, it was I've never seen anything like it. It was egregious. His defensive backs coach, it was funny. Banks ran to the sideline into the arms basically of his defensive backs coach, who was losing his mind. Like, what are you doing? And that's not the first time he's had a lack of effort. So that's a concerning thing for a young player who really, has done nothing but losing since coming into the league. Sure, he's talented, but he certainly, I don't think any player earns the right to do that, but he doesn't even get the benefit of the doubt because you're a young player. We need you to be playing hard at all times here. So that's something that, they'll be on watch with him. Obviously, I would think, the message that you would hope got through. There was a lot of talk, will they bench him? Maybe they just can't bench him because, again, we talked about how banged up that cornerback room is. They have to hope the messaging got through there. But yeah, he's been a guy who they traded up 1 pick to get him when, they could have had him or Porter no matter what, if they just stayed put. Doesn't look like a great decision based on how Porter has played. And again, Banks hasn't been terrible, hasn't been great, but, has certainly not been, I don't think, at the level from what I gather Porter has played.
2 stats that surprised me about the Giants defense. I wouldn't have guessed. They lead the NFL in sacks entering week 8 with 31, but they have just 1 interception, which I think came from a backup linebacker. Why the disconnect between a high sack rate, but not many takeaways?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know. I mean, it is kind of remarkable. There's a young secondary, and like I said, Banks just has never really displayed great ball skills, so that's part of it. As we talked earlier, they're playing a lot of man, so they're not always facing the ball, having eyes on the ball. The safeties have been, it's funny, they let everyone talks about Saquon Barkley, they let Xavier McKinney walk away, and all he does is get an interception every game now in Green Bay. But they had Tyler Nubin there as a 2nd-round pick. Really promising players, played pretty well as a rookie. He's out there every snap. But he came in with this reputation as a ball hawk, and obviously doesn't have any picks because, the 1 pick, like you said, it was off a tip ball in the opener by rookie backup linebacker Darius Musow. But no DBs have a pick through 7 games. And like you said, with the pass rush, you would expect that to be the case. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I don't think the corners have great ball skills. And again, playing a lot of man, maybe they just don't have eyes on the ball as much to make those plays, and the safeties just aren't good at it, at least in Newman's case yet. But that's something that, again, if I'm looking at paths to victory, which you have to do when you're trying to break down a game, the only way I think that they can beat the Steelers tonight is if their defense makes, some takeaways, and then if that's a Russell Wilson deep ball that someone gets over and makes a play at or something like that, because I don't think they can just line up Giants offense versus Steelers defense to score a bunch of points. They're going to need some big plays in other phases, and that's not something they've proven capable of doing to this point.
My last question for you, then I'll let Dave finish things out. I know I'm asking some questions that probably don't have a lot of clear-cut answers, but what is the vision and plan for this team just to become a playoff contender again? They have one playoff win since their last Super Bowl. Besides quarterback, which I know is obvious, I mean, is it where they're truly one quarterback away? Is it culturally? What do they have to do to really become a contender again?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question that they have to answer because, it's funny. This regime came in, after a brutal stretch for this franchise, but Dable and Shane came in 2022, had that unexpected success in year one. They win 9 games. They go and win a playoff game in Minnesota. And I think in some ways that was the worst thing that could happen to them, though, because it sped up their timeline. They came in with a long-range view. They were going to kind of tear it down. Saquon would have been gone. Daniel Jones would have been gone. Tough to let those guys walk after you win 9 games in a playoff game. So obviously they gave Jones the regrettable contract. They franchised Saquon, then let him go. So they kind of went backwards in year 2. Now, certainly here in year 3, it looks like they're at best running in place. They might be going backwards again. So yeah, it is hard to see what is the pathway out of this. I mean, obviously the quarterback is the big one. They'll certainly be moving on from Daniel Jones. Again, you hope you can get your rookie quarterback, but who knows if they're going to find him in this class, if they're going to be positioned to get that guy. Do they go to a stopgap? Kind of what the Steelers did this offseason with a guy like Russell Wilson will be available. Do they go try and get someone like that? I don't know. But I think the selling point for Joe Shane would be I'm building up a young core. We talked about Malik Neighbors, Drew Phillips, Tyler Nubin. These rookies are playing a lot and playing pretty well for the most part. That needs to be what's going to fuel this, turnaround, or whatever you want to call it, because his first 2 draft classes have been sort of hit or miss. We mentioned guys like Banks and, Evan Neal was a number 7 pick. We talked tackler. His name didn't even come up. So that tells you how far he's fallen. A guy like Kayvon Thibodeau was number 5 pick. He's been good. He's hurt right now. He's been good, but has not been great. So he really needs this draft class to hopefully develop a core. You have some of those guys from the first 2. And then again, the hope would be the missing piece is the quarterback. And, you have Dexter Lawrence, you have Andrew Thomas, guys like that locked up for a while. There's a chance it could turn around, but it's just, easier said than done to get that quarterback piece.
We're wrapping up. Dan Dugan from The Athletic covers the Giants. He will be at the game at Acrisure Stadium tonight. Dan, before I get your prediction here, you had an article go up this morning on The Athletic talking about a couple of players that the Giants could part ways with, probably especially if they were to lose this game tonight. Darius Slayton, the wide receiver, is obviously one of them. He's only under contract through the rest of this season, has a manageable salary at this point. I think they reworked his contract with some incentives or whatnot earlier in the offseason. What are the chances that he is no longer a Giant after this game? And, you've got down here potentially a 6th or 7th round pick. Mike could do it with him. Is tonight Darius Slayton's last game? And what do you think about the prospects of him being traded to the Steelers?
I mean, I think it certainly could be, and honestly probably should be. If they lose this game tonight, the season obviously is lost. I mean, if they win this, they can probably sell it hey, we win this, and we go to, play Washington at home, and then you got the Panthers. We could really turn things around. I don't think people are expecting that to be the case. So you see the wide receiver trade market has been active. So it's you can sit on the sidelines. You might get kind of shut out just in terms of people not needing them because it's been, kind of fast and furious there. But I think you have to look at Darius Slayton as a guy who, he's not happy with his contract. He kind of was open to getting traded this offseason. They kind of had the leverage. Just said, well, no, we're not going to trade you. So just show up. And he kind of came with his tail between his legs. Like you said, they gave him some incentives that he won't even come close to achieving. But, so he's in his last year of his deal. I don't think he's going to be clamoring to come back here. It doesn't feel like they're going to be clamoring to pay him what he thinks he's worth. So if you're in a situation like the Giants are right now, you shouldn't be holding on to guys like that. He's a good, solid role player. He's not a great player. If you're sitting there 2-6, 2-7 at the trade deadline, doesn't make sense to hold on to an impending free agent who isn't part of your plans. And then, yeah, like I said, in the story today, I was talking to a league exec, and he said probably like a 6th or a 7th round pick. I mean, so it's not going to be a big cost to go get him. He's not super expensive. I think he's got like $1.5 million maybe left on his contract. So that's not going to be cumbersome to some team looking to acquire him. And yeah, so I mean, if you're the Steelers, obviously I know there's all like the Cooper Kupp talk and he's not going anywhere. I don't think Darius Slayton would excite you, but I mean, as I was looking at the stats there, you guys know better than me. It just doesn't feel like they're getting much from these other receivers. He'd be better than all those other guys they have.
Right.
So you got Pickens. Darius Slayton has been very well established as like a solid number, ideal with probably number 3, but he's been a solid number 2 type receiver. I mean, every year he gets like 50 catches, 750 yards, 4 touchdowns. Like you can do a lot worse than that for a 6th or 7th round pick if you're a contender trying to get over the top. So yeah, I would think teams would have interest in him. I mean, he's not the Hopkins or Devontae Adams type level player, but that's why the cost will be lower. And I think he could help a team like the Steelers, or there's plenty of teams that are in the market for a receiver, but obviously talking Steelers, I think he'd be a good pickup for them for sure.
All right, Dan, how do you see this one going tonight? DraftKings has this Steelers 6-point home favorites tonight. Going to be buzzing primetime Monday night game. Do you mind throwing out a score prediction for us? How you think this goes tonight?
Yeah, I mean, sure. Listen, every time I feel like the Giants have no chance, like those are the games that they somehow win or make competitive. So I put my prediction in print the other day at Steelers 20-13. So still covering kind of a low scoring type rock fight. I think that's probably being a little generous to the Giants. I'm not quite that optimistic that they'll be able to keep it to a 1 touchdown game. So I'll stick to ahead and print, but certainly leave some wiggle room. That like 13 almost seems generous, which tells you the state of the Giants offense. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up like 27-6 or something. But I guess I was in an optimistic move when I made my prediction. But certainly, I think the Steelers win. I think they probably win pretty comfortably. I don't see the Giants scoring enough to make this a truly competitive game.
Well, Dan, we ran you a little bit long, but you're so good. We enjoyed having you a first-time guest on the Terrible Podcast. These two teams don't get together very often, but next time they do, we certainly would like to have you back on again. So enjoy your stay in Pittsburgh. Enjoy the game tonight, and thanks for being on with Dave and Alex on the Terrible Podcast on this Monday morning.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
And welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. Again, our special thanks to Dan Dugan, covers the Giants for The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at DDuggan21. That's DDUGGAN21. Really great stuff from Dan, Dave.
Yeah, first timer. Glad to have him. Obviously, writes for The Athletic and covers the Giants for a little while over there. So got some good insight for him overall. And next time these two teams get together, hopefully have him back on again. He was very enjoyable to talk to.
All right, Dave, let's you and I preview this game. Pittsburgh 5-2, the Giants 2-5. The Giants offense really struggling the last 2 weeks, scoring 10 points combined, including a 28-3 loss last week against the Eagles. They're the 30th ranked scoring offense. We know their weaknesses. Let me frame it to you in a different way. Is there anything or what does concern you or at least intrigue you about this Giants offense?
I think Daniel Jones taking off with the football, either when design runs or scramble type situations. I think that's one thing that you've got to have make sure you recognize or at least try to control overall. The guy is good on his feet, not afraid to take off with the football. And once again, they will have design runs with him. They'll try to spread you out offensively. They run a lot of 11 personnel. They'll sprinkle in some 12 personnel overall. They will go heavy in short yardage situations with 3 tight ends and let Daniel Jones sneak it that way. I think the big thing here, though, is making sure that you contain Daniel Jones while trying to stop the run and try to keep them behind the chains, get yourself in situations where maybe you can tee off on Daniel Jones. But my number one concern, I think, at least going into this, is the running ability of Daniel Jones and his ability to get a lot of yards that way, both by design and not by design.
Yeah, it's interesting and you and Dan talked about it, how heavy of a pass team they are, but there's still some scramble opportunities there for Daniel Jones. He actually leads the Giants in first down rushes this year. He's got 15 of them. I know they've had some injuries to Singletary, and that might have changed had health not been a factor, but still your quarterback leads your team in first downs on the ground. And what I found on tape, and they'll run, design quarterback stuff in a lot of different circumstances, but especially second and medium, 2nd and 6, 2nd and 10 seems to be kind of a sweet spot for them to try to get themselves into, third and manageable, maybe, catch the defense off guard and pick up a quick first down. Watch out for that running back in the flat. Usually on those kind of design quarterback runs, they'll have the running back in the backfield, sidecar, and then he'll kind of have that fast motion out of the flat to try to get the remove a defender from the box to open up Jones on the design quarterback run. So watch out for that. For me, in terms of the skill set, Malik Neighbors, number one receiver, back from the concussion, having a really good season. I assume Porter will be on him for a lot, if not the entirety of this game. That's a guy that can go out there and make some crazy plays.
Yeah, he's obviously talented. I think Slayton, you see some things on film with him. He's still got some separation ability, especially on some of those comebacks where he'll drive it upfield and then break back towards the quarterback. So he's obviously a weapon. They use Wandale Robinson in a lot of different ways. Sometimes maybe a couple times a game, you'll see him lined up in the backfield as well. They're not afraid to use the screen game to any one of those running backs. As far as their actual true running game with the running backs go, they will try to spread you out. They're not afraid to run out of 11. They do better, it seems like, when those running backs really hit the hole in a hurry. They will pull. They don't mind pulling the guards and the tackles within that. They will build even some pass concepts off of that. You see, I don't know, about 6-7 times a game, maybe some RPO type stuff. They even try to throw some of those quick pop passes, those quick slants to Slayton out of that. I think one of them, though, on film, a couple of times, I think on film, though, they've got caught for an eligible man downfield, even though they got the ball out kind of quick overall. So not truly an exotic. They run a lot of gun overall with Daniel Jones. Back there, they mix in, a reasonable amount of play action. And as you mentioned too, one thing to look for is those running backs darting out of the backfield pre-snap to try to remove the extra defender out of the box there. So you just want to keep, they've struggled at creating explosive plays down the field, especially 20-yard passes or more. I think they have 6 or 7, maybe something like that down the field. Just want to make sure that you really, something that the Steelers struggled with first half of that game, specifically against the Jets. You want to make sure you just tackle these guys out in space. You don't want a lot of yards after the catch after this. And then obviously on first down, if you can get them in second and long situations, third and long situation, if they get above the chains, they're pretty good on second and third down. It can keep teams off balance overall. And then once again, if they get third or fourth down and one type situations, they're just going to line it up and try to power you with the quarterback sneak with Daniel Jones. So keep a lid on things. Don't let there was a time, at least I think I came across a film compilation, I think it was last year. They like to run that shot concept there with the kind of that slot fade, and they'll try to go heavy, maybe with the 2-man route, 3-man route type situation, and try to hit you with that slot fade. Slayton and Neighbors are both good at double move type situations. Expect once or twice this game to kind of that fake stop block on the outside. And then release and try to get you in kind of that, that hole down the sideline there. So that's something else that stuck out on tape. But if you keep the lid on this thing with Neighbors, shut down the run, get them in third and long situations, you should be able to get off the field.
Yeah, who was that? I think Dallas corner that Neighbors made look silly a couple of weeks ago with some of those double moves. And so you need to be really disciplined with your eyes in this one. I mean, Pittsburgh is always to their advantage, as is the case for most teams, when they can make the opponent one-dimensional, and the Giants do a good job of making themselves one-dimensional, even though they're 2-5. Look at some of the first half, run pass splits. They're as pass heavy as anyone in the NFL. You're right on those RPOs. Watch out for Slayton on those glance routes, those slants. I mean, he's got some speed. They have good team speed at receiver with Neighbors and Slayton, and Hyatt's not playing a ton for them, but he's a really fast guy, second-year guy, and so don't want to ignore that. Because they can hit some big plays, and they'll probably need some chunk plays to make up for the lack of fluidity their offense is showing right now. Yeah, the run game, it's varied. some power to the boundary. They get Singletary back. Rookie Tyrone Tracy's having a pretty decent season overall. They're just not simply running the football a ton. They're trying to protect Jones, do a lot of just 3-man routes on third down, try to get, they're just kind of site adjustments on the outside with their middle runner. And so it's not super exotic overall, some Yankee concepts. So just be buttoned up. Should get some pressure in this one. Jones has been sacked a ton. The only thing that really concerns me, and I mentioned this to Dan, it's been something I've written about some, is how much better, for whatever reason, Daniel Jones is on the road than he is at home. He's got 6 touchdowns, no picks on the road this year. They're 2-1 on the road. He's got no touchdowns and 4 picks at home this year. I think they're 0-4. And so for whatever reason, maybe less pressure, as Stan talked about, Daniel Jones is a different guy when he's away from his home crowd.
And some of their runs, they don't have a lot of explosive 10-yard or more runs, but when those do happen, it seems to be pretty good creases between the 2 guards, especially in some of their power type concepts with those guards pulling or whatnot. But not a bad center overall up the middle, and their guards aren't. I was a big Runyon fan coming out, obviously football pedigree and all like that with his last name and all, but it seems like when they do hit those 10-yard runs, it's pretty good gaps up the middle there, and those running backs, either Singletary or Tracy, hit it pretty good for a nice chunk. So Patrick Queen might be busy in this one.
And we both like John Michael Schmitz coming out of Minnesota. Mm-hmm. And so I think he's only played maybe okay for them. Haven't studied it as in depth. I was looking more scheme than individual, but there's some talent there. I would also just say watch out for Wando Robinson on third down. And it's been kind of a lot of check down type stuff. So it's not really over the top, but he came into this week with 29 targets on third down alone. That was 8 more than anybody else in the NFL. And so again, I think some of that is some of those check down type stuff. He's not averaging yards per catch. He's only got 6 first downs on those 29 targets, but watch out for that number 17. Like you said, they can align him kind of all over the place.
He's slippery too, boy, with his size and all. That's something obviously we studied him quite a bit coming out of college and all. So look, I mean, they've got some talent there at the skill positions overall, especially at the wide receiver position. And the running backs aren't awful, but where it seems like this offense is really struggling is obviously the quarterback position and plays when they really need it and keeping themselves out of third and long type situations. I don't think they want to avoid Daniel Jones from having to drop back 40, 50 times a game in this. Might be a perfect time for them to at least try to come out and try to run earlier as opposed to passing, to try to see if they can establish something there with, try some of those motions to get some guys, try to go up against some lighter boxes and see if they can get some success there. But just be wary of Daniel Jones taking off with the football, and keeping them behind the chains could end up making it for a long, long night for that Giants offense.
For as much criticism as Jones gets, he's a tough guy. He's got an iron chin, and so you give him credit for that. Even the tight end's getting a little bit more involved. The tight ends only have 14 catches this year, but Theo Johnson, the rookie out of Penn State, has got 8 catches in his last 3 games. So a little uptick in production there from the tight end position. All right. Hey, let's play with the Giants defense, I should say. And, it's not a bad unit. I mean, statistically, it's a pretty above average unit in a lot of categories. They're the 12th ranked scoring defense. They're first in sacks, which is a crazy stat to me. I would not have guessed New York was leading the NFL in sacks. They got some really good people up front in Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns. So I know they've had their issues as well here defensively, but I think that front seven still has some challenges.
Yeah, but boy, as Mike Tomlin made sure to point out, that Dexter Lawrence is a handful, and there's a couple of clips floating around on social media of all of his sacks so far this season, and man, that guy's just brute power. And even putting a lot of times you'll see in the pressure reels, people try to put a guard in a center on him, and he manages to, a couple of them have been after 3-second kind of cleanup sacks, but boy, when in the ones where he does have the clean wins, they are impressive wins overall. So Ryan McCollum's going to have his hands full up there. Both those guards, Sayamalo and and Mason McCormick are going to have to help out Ryan McCollum at center. You cannot let that guy wreck you in a pass rush type situation. And same goes with Brian Burns. They went out there and made a big acquisition with him off the edge. They'll move him around. He is a true one of the league's better pass rushers. And this team's, as you mentioned, got a lot of sacks so far. They don't do so good, I don't think, on a pressure situation overall in games. But when they can pin their ears back and get after the passer, they usually get it done. So you definitely want to stay ahead of the chains and not be a sitting duck back there. The Steelers obviously counteract that. Will try to run the ball early and often in this one. They should, at least on paper and at least on tape, they should have some success running at these guys up front. So you got to get the bodies on guys like Dexter Lawrence up front, try to get to the second level on Okereke and guys like that. And, I wouldn't be afraid to try to run to the edge and see, there's been a lot of consternation about effort and tackling, especially when it comes to these defensive backs overall. I want to test and see how those guys do out in space. Might not be bad to continue on with getting the ball in Darnell Washington's hands on some of those misdirection plays out there. See how those guys like trying to tackle big guy like Mount Washington out there. So on paper, as long as you're not dropping back a lot in second and third long situations, you should be able to your front should be able to handle this and just try to pound the rock at them and get into situations that we've seen several times throughout the years or throughout this year with this offense is wear down that front, get them into the fourth quarter where they just are tired of it.
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh needs to show a better rhythm and be more rhythmic on offense in this one. I thought they hit a lot of chunk plays against the Jets, which was fantastic and refreshing, and had not seen it to that degree in literally almost a decade. So I'm not knocking it, but there wasn't always that fluidity for the offense. And of course, the slow start, which we harp on every single week. Hopefully it happens, but it's hard to really count on at this point. I will say, got to be, like you said, Dave, aware of Brian Burns. I don't want to boot to him because if he doesn't take the cheese, he's a really athletic guy. I like the matchup there for Brian Burns against Russell Wilson in the Giants' favor. How would you run on these guys? Because obviously they have not stopped the run that well this year, but you got Big Lawrence in the middle. Pittsburgh likes to be physical and post their will. When you're facing that kind of guy, do you try to run more on the edges? Dan Moore said this weekend, we're going to run right at him. Is that your approach? What is your philosophy there?
Well, one of my keys to the game is you got to run right on these guys. These guys have had trouble with the right side of the offense, which would be the left side of their defense over there. And particularly I have on 60, let's see. They are also the worst in the NFL when it comes to yards per carry allowed on attempts to their left side of their defense, which obviously is the right side of the Steelers offense. On 60 rush attempts by opposing offenses to the right of center, the Giants have allowed 6.4 yards per carry in those situations. And against 12 and 13 personnel groupings, something the Steelers obviously use quite a bit, that defense has allowed 7.6 yards per rushing attempt. Now, albeit it's just 10 total tries in that, but I don't think they've faced a lot of teams that kind of specialize in that 12 or 13 personnel. So if I'm the Steelers, I come out in that 12 and 13. I try to pound the rock to the right side behind Mason McCormick and Broderick Jones and try to wash out that side and try to get Najee Harris on some of those DBs to come up and try to make those tackles. But I would expect to see some heavy right side running by the Steelers offense out of 12-13 personnel.
Yeah, it's a really good stat there. And while Lawrence does not come off the field often, he's playing about 3/4 of the snaps when he's off the field. It's kind of like when Myles Garrett's off the field. You go play pass whenever he's on the sidelines. When Lawrence is being rotated out, you got to really take advantage and run the ball, I think, then. There is a concern about him and just kind of the domino effect. I worry about his ability as a pass rusher to collapse the pocket. And Russell Wilson has a tendency to bail even on clean pockets, some phantom pressure, kind of have some easier sight lines to roll out. We saw that early last week. If Lawrence gets some pressure and kind of walks McCollum back, does Wilson roll out and it's harder for your tackles to block? You're dealing with Brian Burns. So a little worried about that, but I imagine they're going to really draw their attention to Lawrence. That will, though, again, open up some of those one-on-one matchups. Typically under Pat Meyer, if the guard's uncovered, he's going to help out the tackles. I imagine in this game, they're going to adjust here a little bit and help out the center to make sure Lawrence is taken care of, but that's going to create one-on-one matchups for Dan Moore at left tackle and Broderick Jones at right tackle. And Brian Burns plays about evenly split on both sides, left side and right side. So I imagine they're going to try to get him on Broderick more often in this one, but Broderick Jones will have to be probably at his best tonight because he probably won't be getting a lot of help from, say, Mason McCormick.
Yeah, probably see some split zone in this one to bring the tight end across, probably chop down Burns if you can a couple of times to try to get loose whatever side he's on as well. But this, I once again, I expect the Steelers to run, just do what they do, try to run the football out of heavy early on in this thing and try to make hay that way, stay ahead of the chains. And you hit on, faster starts and all. One of my keys, kind of obvious, no early rust from Russ. Obviously got off to a slower start against the Jets in that game. And, if not for that turnover by Beanie Bishop late in the first half against the Jets, you kind of wonder if that team would have went or at best would have went into halftime at 15-6. And, you don't know how that Jets possession would have gone had not had that interception early there. So like to see Russell Wilson come out with a lot cleaner start this time. And just we need to see this team start scoring some first quarter points in here, because this offense has produced just 19 total points in the first quarter of games this season, just one total touchdown, and that was Darnell Washington back in week 2. And I think you could see this thing has a potential of getting away from the from the Giants if you jump on them early here. So hopefully in the first quarter, one of us or both of us is tweeting out, hey, that's just the second or maybe even third first quarter touchdown that this Steelers offense has produced this year. And once again, you have to go all the way back to week 2 was the last time that they've gone down and had a opening quarter touchdown. So Russell Wilson going to have to play a part in that. I think they will have at times throughout this game tasty matchups to push the football down the field. Like Dan said, Pickens on really whoever, to be honest with you, especially if they're playing some man type situation. I think you said what on later downs they man up.
Yeah, to me, especially on third down, they go cover one, and not just cover one, but a lot of cover one robber or lurk, where they're going to have a safety come down and just watch the quarterback's eyes and take away any sort of crossing routes, try to jump anything. So Wilson really has to be aware of the lurker, I think, in those third down situations where they really tend to man up. They send a little bit more pressure and they want somebody to try to get eyes on the football. To take away something and jump a route. So they've not done a good job of that this year. Like I mentioned to Dan, only one interception this entire season, which is crazy for a team that's played 7 games. And that came from a backup linebacker early in the year. With all the sacks they're getting, it's weird they're not getting those takeaways. The pressure rate, like you said, is not as impressive as their sack total. So that might explain things. But, got to play clean football here to not let the Giants hang around.
One thing I think that you smartly pointed out is the bat downs that they have, especially when you've got an undersized quarterback in Russell Wilson here. A worst case scenario, what maybe scares me the most when it comes to outside of their ability to get sacks from Burns and Dexter Lawrence is their ability to get their hands up, and you kind of hopefully this doesn't come to fruition, but have one of those balls get batted up into the air and fall into the arms of one of their defenders there. So you might want to choose wisely when throwing, towards the middle of that line, or really because Burns is long anyway, off the edge. So just be careful of the batted balls in this one.
Yeah, you may move the launch point, and you want to be a little careful with that to make sure they're not getting some free rushes. But Brian Burns has 6 pass deflections this year. I didn't go through them one by one, but I imagine he's not turning and running in coverage too often. I'm going to imagine those are coming at the line of scrimmage and those types of things. They got 8 collectively from the D-line this year. Lawrence has 1, and Nunez Rochez has 1 as well. But Burns is that real guy that's so, like a TJ Watt, so good at getting his hands up in those throwing lanes when he can't affect the game as an actual pass rusher. So with Wilson being a short quarterback, little concern there. So, but overall, as you said, that Giants secondary, it's hurting. Like the Jets last week, they play a lot of man coverage. We'll see if Pittsburgh continues to use stacks and rubs and switch releases to try to get some favorable coverage. I didn't see the Giants have as many issues with defending bunches the way that the Jets did on their tape. So I don't know if you'll see that quite as often, but in man coverage, you like Pittsburgh's matchup.
Yeah, absolutely, you do. Even with with their receivers, the way this Giants secondary is coming in banged up, and Mike Tomlin talked about they've got talented players over there, safety and some of those other corner and all like that, but they're inexperienced as well too. So the Steelers match up great to me on offense outside of Burns and Dexter Lawrence. So if you can control those two guys in the pass rush, you're able to establish the run here, you should be expected to move the football down the field against this defense.
Yeah, I think they can, but the Giants, I mean, they've not been bad defensively. They've held the opponent to at or under 21 points in 5 of 7 games this year, despite an offense giving them very little run support. They're one of the top third down defenses in the NFL. They're a little above average in the red zone. So there are some strengths to this team. But I mean, I think Pittsburgh, if they can just kind of get into a rhythm, get into a flow, control the clock, get that run game going, build off of that, like the Jets game, they'll be okay.
All right.
All right, Dave, anything else here to cover in this one? Special teams, they've got a backup punter. They've had some injuries there. I think Pittsburgh will have the advantage. And can they go 4 straight games with a block punter field goal? They're going to be gunning for it.
Yeah, they're not going to have their regular punter for this one. He's been ruled out. How many games is he? Did he miss the last one too?
Yeah, I think he's been out the last couple. I think they got Matt Hawk in there as the backup. He's done okay, but not quite as good. And their kicker, I think they had an injury too. I think their kicker is back, but Pittsburgh, I would give them the edge.
Yeah, definitely want to come out of this one with winning the third phase of this one in special teams.
All right, Dave, I think we're good. How we playing the end of this one, since it's the Monday show? Make our pick right now. Is that what we should jump to?
Yeah, let's get that out of the way. Then we'll get to a few reader emails and get out of here on this Monday morning.
All right, for my prediction in this one, I know Pittsburgh has had 2, by their standards, very rare, comfortable victories. Multi-possession. Maybe we're getting a little too spoiled on that they come back to earth a little bit. And I just could not get that stat out of my head about Daniel Jones and how much better he is on the road. I don't know if it's just correlation, not causation, whatever the case is, but he is a different type of guy this year and throughout his career. So I got a close game. Pittsburgh kind of reminds you that, hey, the Steelers, they do tend to play close games. I'm not saying they're going to play down to their opponent. They're not overlooking the Giants. They're too veteran of a defense. You got Wilson, a quarterback. They're not looking down. It's just the NFL, and those games are hard to win. And the Giants have a good D-line. They can create some problems up front. So all that said, I do have Pittsburgh winning this one, but by a typically Steelers narrow margin, 20-17.
All right. I'd like them winning a little bit more comfortable in this one. In fact, I was debating going 26-16 or 46-16 in this one. Boy, it's been a while since we've seen the Steelers really whoop up on somebody here. And you got all this synergy, Monday Night Football, Acrisure. You got a chance to go 6-2. You got the bye week up next. You got a Giants team that really could be or will be out of it if they lose this one. If you could get off to a hot start, could you see this thing snowball the way it did several years ago on that Thursday night game against the Panthers? But I'll go more conservative side, but even still a lopsided victory when it comes to what the Steelers do. I have the Steelers 26, Giants 16. My only fear overall is just don't give the football away and set those Giants up on some short fields to be able to keep this game close. But 26-16, that's my final answer.
All right, hey, rooting for it for sure to take another double-digit victory. I mean, I think they can run the ball. It's crazy. The Giants are so bad against the run, despite having a guy like Dexter Lawrence. It's crazy they can be that poor up front when you have one of the best pluggers the NFL's seen in quite some time. So besides turnovers, if I had to put the shoe on the other foot, as we always do when we make our picks, we're coming out, we'll do a show Tuesday, by the way, tomorrow, we're coming out downtrodden, a Steelers loss. How would that have happened?
A lot of penalties on the Steelers side, probably defensive side, some pass interferences in there, a couple of big plays down the sideline to Malik Neighbors. You know, you said can't include turnover. Obviously, turnovers would be included in that. But I would think it would be just the Steelers, a lot of what Mike Tomlin says, kicking our own butt, a lot of penalties in this, especially on the defensive side of football. Something like a 40-30, couple of 30-yard pass interference calls or something silly along those lines. So I think for the Steelers to lose this game, we would be talking about a lot of them kicking their own selves in their own butt here.
A lot of Steelers beating Steelers. Yeah, for sure. I can totally see that. I think if the Giants, beyond that, and I agree with you there, if the Giants D-line has success, if Lawrence has a day, which he typically does, if Brian Burns, who's got a sack in each of his last 3 games, is able to create some pressure in those one-on-one matchups, especially against the Broderick Jones, that would be an issue for Pittsburgh that gets them off schedule, creates a lot of negativity for Pittsburgh offensively, keeps the score down, and the game ultimately close. And if the Giants can hit some big plays where Neighbors goes off and makes a play, or they got that team speed at receiver, somebody gets behind a corner and hits a 40-yard play, kind of like the Dallas game, maybe the Colts game, but probably a little more Dallas game where some of those backup receivers are able to make some plays downfield. And maybe Pittsburgh will struggle against the run a little bit more because they typically do worse against those more mobile quarterbacks like Richardson before he got hurt in that Colts game on some of those zone reads where the backside edge has to respect that and has to kind of slow down a little bit and read the mesh point as opposed to just charging after the quarterback when you're facing the Jets or some, statue type of quarterback. So that might be it. But obviously on paper, Pittsburgh has the advantage. There's also some crazy stats about Monday Night Football and primetime stuff for Russ versus Daniel Jones. Russ is so good in these moments. Jones is terrible in these moments. I know it's just all kind of, funny stats, all those kinds of things. So obviously you expect Pittsburgh to win. Do you call this must win? I've seen some people say that. I wouldn't use the term for this one, but it would obviously be very disappointing to lose this one going into that long bye week.
Yeah, I would not call this a must win for the Steelers, but it's a game that you should win. I mean, look, you got some help within the division and all this past week, so a loss, isn't going to kill you, but you obviously would like to have that momentum going into the bye week. And as we talked about, 5-3 would coming out of these first 8 games with a 5-3 record would feel very disappointing at this point. The way this team, has rattled some off and done what they overall look. I mean, they were one play away from winning the Dallas game. They let the Colts game obviously get away from. But I would not call it a must win. Just one that they probably should win.
Agreed. I think some people might be using that term in the sense of you got to strike while the iron is hot. The Ravens just lost. You can really take control of some of the division here going into the bye. Not that it's over, and obviously not played an AFC North game. That's going to really determine how the standings end up. But man, if you can be 6-2, the Ravens 5-3 going into the bye. Who do the Ravens play next week? Are they off next week? I think they're playing somebody next week. They're playing the Bengals on Thursday night.
Oh, okay.
And so, you hope obviously whoever loses that game is going to hurt themselves even more. Obviously, whoever wins is going to help themselves even more. So it kind of, washes out. But let's just say, the Steelers win this game and the Bengals beat the Ravens on Thursday night. Now the Ravens are 5-4. You're 6-2. You got some cushion, even though you're going to face them twice, on the backside of the bye week. So if you can map that out that way, you're in a good spot.
All
right, Dave. Quick programming note. I know we're scheduled to have the live stream tonight on YouTube that Dave and I do twice a month, but with the Monday night game, obviously we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to, I think in all likelihood, kick that to next Monday. I think trying to do it Tuesday. We got too much going on there post game. So just a heads up for those who check out the YouTube live streams. And as always, Dave, we can get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let's get to the reader emails here. We'll start with Chris Lockhart here. It says, "Good morning, gentlemen. This is Chris from Zealand. I've always wondered if you guys always watch a Steeler game with your writing and blogging caps on, or do you put your fan hats on and cheer like a crazy person sometimes. He says, I'm spinning my towel, getting pissed when we are losing, and cheering and screaming when we win the same game. Do you guys always sit and watch because you have to write about it, or do you let loose too? I don't. I mean, I've done this so long. I mean, look, I still root in tit situations. I'm rooting like everybody else does. Make a play here. Get that kind of thing here. But I don't have like huge emotional swings or punching walls or twirling towels or anything like that. I've become way muted from 20-year-old Dave, the way that used to be. So probably not a guy that you'd want to watch the game with by any stretch there. But I mean, look, I'm a fan at heart, and in intense situations, I pump my fist occasionally and that kind of thing, but probably not anything over the top.
So the drywall at the Dave Bryan household is safe.
Yeah, not like it used to be. I have damaged that before in some houses that we've lived in.
Some security deposits you did not get back is what it sounds like there. Yeah, I'm like you, Dave, for the most part. I will get a little amped up about very nerdy specific things, usually special teams related, like the block field goal. Like I love those moments, just kind of those specific type of things. I'm quieter late in the game because usually I'm writing more for like my winners losers article that goes up, right after the game. So I'm just kind of focused on that, or I'm researching some sort of stat or something like that. So usually I'm a little more animated early in the game than I am late, because late in the game it's getting to like, okay, we're transitioning into post-game work mode. So it's been muted some, but certainly you're still excited when they win for, just to for the fun of it all. And also from our experience, the site and Twitter interactions are a lot more enjoyable after a victory than a loss. So there's a lot of benefits for victories.
I definitely there. Let's see here. What else do we have? I think I got one more in here from Todd Jitzler. Says, you always feel like there's no such thing as a trap game in the NFL. I'm sure that I have bias because I pay more attention to the Steelers than any other team. But do the Steelers drop more winnable games than other teams? Fans talk frequently about the typical Tomlin trap game. I know it is pro football and anything can happen. There is no reason on paper that should merit a loss tonight to the Giants. That being said, they do play teams that are underdogs to very close every time. Like they are more prepared for a tough matchups and less prepared against easier ones. We get this all the time. If you were to parse this out team by team, I'm sure. I mean, do the Steelers? We have mapped this out before, right? I'm sure it's close overall, right?
I'm trying to think back to some of the stuff. I know that was talked about a bit last year in that 3-game losing streak, losing to the Patriots, the Cardinals. I think that data does say that Pittsburgh is more likely to lose some of these quote unquote games they should win more than other teams. But is that because they're, a trap game or looking down on the opponent? I think it's hard to make that blanket statement for the entire team. It may be more individual. I just think the NFL is hard to win. And we see this every week across the board where somebody pulls off an upset. The Browns, for example, winning that game against the favored Ravens. I'm sure there's other games this week you could point to. And for Pittsburgh, there's a team that doesn't score a lot of points. And so when you're an offense that doesn't score much, your games are always close and they can be decided by 1 or 2 plays late in the game. So when you kind of have the model of always trying to make that last play like Pittsburgh has had for several seasons, you're more prone to losing those games as opposed to an offense. It's always scoring, 30 points a game that generally is just going to beat those teams they should be because they're putting up points on the board. So I think it's just partially the style in which Pittsburgh plays, along with just the randomness that the NFL consistently proves to be week in and week out.
And look, any given Sunday, these guys are professionals, and you got a lot of playmakers on both sides of the football. That's why, look, this isn't Michigan versus Appalachian State. Mike Tomlin even said during his Mike Tomlin show the other night, that this isn't a group of 5 team. This isn't he laid out all the things. These guys know at this point. The other teams paid to play as well too. And look, betting lines are made to attract money on both sides of them. It's what the public thinks. They want to balance it enough where they get enough action on both sides. That's why you see the point spreads that you do. But then within that, you see teams jump up and bite other teams on any given week where a team 5-6 point favored to win comes out with a victory there. Obviously when you roll back to a couple of times like last season against the Cardinals and the Patriots and all, those are games that the Steelers, you play those games 10 times, the Steelers probably win 90% of those. But anything can happen. And does it maybe seem from watching the Steelers all these years that it might happen a little bit more to them than other teams? I suppose. But look, this is a game that they should win. If they don't win this game Monday night, there's going to be a lot of hand wringing, and they'll be back to the talk of that's a Mike Tomlin special, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, for sure. And if they lose tonight, they deserve the criticism for it. They should win. On paper, they're better in virtually every aspect. On paper is just that. Got to go out there and execute. But yeah, if you lose this one, you squandered a really good opportunity, and you'll have this kind of linger for the bye, which might be the worst part of it all. There's no hey, let's just get back in the room and let's get out there next week. Then you're going to be 5-3 for the bye and facing, like we said earlier, a pretty good Washington team coming off a miraculous victory.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We got through a couple of those. We wanted to make today's episode a little bit shorter so people could have time to get through it and all before the game kicks off. We'll obviously have all the pregame, postgame coverage. There'll probably be a transaction or two happen here before the game. Make sure you get by Steelers Depot and see that. We got the scouting reports up, everything that you need to get ready for tonight's game. And as mentioned, we'll have everything you will need after the game. Alex and I'll be back on Tuesday morning with a follow-up podcast. We probably won't do a podcast Wednesday, and then we'll end the week with a Friday podcast going into the bye weekend there as well too. So shout out to Dan Dugan for coming on. Make sure to follow him. Make sure to follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. And until Tuesday morning, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.